Yeah. Okay.
So the
I
the no
guess I need to hit
background
okay.
check guy.
Yeah.
What's that?
I touched the okay on the screen.
Yep, you gotta hit
So
okay.
yes.
That means it's okay to record, and I'm not in trouble with
Or
the state of California.
okay. I'm gonna adjust a little. So I did talk that last time and I was disappointed. Every time I talk to you, I follow all your stuff. It's crazy.
Oh my.
So I'm one of the guys that follows, and I was probably early on because I the first time I talked to you was actually when I missed a scheduled call,
Oh,
and you somehow contacted me, and I quickly ran from cutting the grass over to my church, and
I remember that. Yep, yep,
that
yep.
was that might have been 2019. I don't even know,
Yeah,
or 20.
that was a while ago.
Yeah, because I sold the property. It would have been summertime, but anyway. But so that was super disappointing, and I have these disappointing things happen.
Oh, we all get those. So
Yes. So, and then the conversation where I told my story, I really want to talk to you as some kind of intellectual on this, giant vervaeke words and this intellectual landscape that you've laid out and all the corner people.
yeah, yeah.
But I don't know. I don't know how that'll work out. So I tried to have things to talk about today
Mm,
besides getting caught up in
it's your
personal
time.
stories. Right.
It's your
So
time.
you really must have opened everything up because I found that slot and just I was thinking, should I do it? And there was a slot, so I clicked it.
I
So
had I had a technical mishap with my calendar,
yes,
and my calendar got flooded, but I decided that this must be the Lord's will, and so I'm
it's
going to talk
Providence.
to everyone who
Yeah,
found their way onto the calendar.
yeah,
So just had a lovely conversation with a guy from Georgia. That was
nice,
beautiful. Hope it makes it
nice.
to the channel. You never know with these conversations. You really got to check. I don't want to
Yeah.
I hate posting a conversation and the person a few months later sort of sheepishly comes to me and says, "Could you take it off the internet?" I don't like when that
Well,
happens. So
yeah. Well, that's one of the big things about the corner is that this is this very strange, wonderful thing where we're talking to people,
yeah,
and it's like to me, it's the thing that's supposed to happen in churches is or people are supposed to tell their story. It's
yep,
the big thing when it's to come to Jesus
yep,
and certainly share it. And it's but anyway, I was looking around on these videos and I saw you talked about Chesterton's wall
yeah,
and it was the CRC same sex marriage talk.
yeah.
And now I'm a Methodist, so you know I'm a follower of Jesus, and I'm in that group. So we're in that same kind of conversation. But I wanted to start out with Chesterton because I don't know that you're super well versed in Chesterton, but you see these quotes and this pretty remarkable character, and he's the one that in some way inspires C.S. Lewis or something. And it's like,
Right.
well, that's crazy because C.S. Lewis is he's so much easier to understand.
Yeah.
Chesterton is like to me is like a Peterson character, and you're the C.S. Lewis of
Oh,
Peterson. You bring it down a little bit, so
I
that's
don't think I'm anywhere near as powerful or clear as Lewis. When I read Lewis, sometimes it's
well,
like his
but
ability to make complex things clear was
yeah,
truly remarkable.
it was remarkable because Chesterton makes complex things very complex.
But poetic sometimes. Yeah,
Oh
yeah.
yeah, but to me, so I thought about Chesterton. And I thought as I'm listening to his Everlasting Man, which it was this book that Lewis thought was
Yeah,
terrific.
yeah.
So I'm re-listening to it. I do audiobooks, and where was I even going with that? Chesterton, he makes complex ideas complex because you're barely. Oh, he's the Pajot to me. So I'll make these connections.
Okay.
So in 1925, he's telling all these stories, and he's saying, the world. You think it's one way, but it's not. It's exactly opposite of what you think. And he tells these stories, and I'm listening to him. And I'm thinking, I don't know exactly what he's saying,
Yeah,
but it really sounds like he's right.
yeah,
And he's like everything he wants to flip.
yeah,
That you think it's this, and it's exactly the opposite of that.
yeah, yeah,
He has some way of laying out the world.
yeah. It's Chesterton.
So, yeah,
He is, you know, I've I start way too many books and finish way too few. But
Yeah.
his
Yeah.
his biography of Francis
Yeah.
is just amazing.
Well,
I'm blown away when and then I listen to it again. I would listen to the chapter again and listen to it again,
mhm.
because each time I go through it, I get more out of it.
Yeah, I saw you were reading that, and it inspired me to consider getting another book because I have to get audiobooks so I can get through them. But I've fallen into the Vanderclay YouTube rabbit hole, and I don't have
Oh,
time for nothing else.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Although my
But
production the last couple of weeks has been a little down, so
yeah, well, yeah,
it's been busy. Got other things to do. So
yeah. So Chesterton was my first thing, and it was I wanted to connect that to Lewis, Peugeot, and then the idea. One of the things that I wanted to talk about was this idea of how he kind of sets the world upside down, and it connects with me, a follower of Jesus. Jesus turns the world upside down, and Chesterton says, yeah, the world is upside down. And one of the stories, and I might not get it exactly right, but there was a story about he was talking to a gentleman, and the guy was telling him all religions, or the Christian religion, is based on phallic symbols, and it's probably toxic masculinity and all of the things that you imagine they would say about Christianity. And Chesterton was getting upset at this guy, and then he just burst out laughing and said something to the effect of, "Yeah, men build these giant phallic symbols. If women had been in charge, the pyramid, this giant phallic symbol, would have actually been flipped upside down, and they would have built things that the point is on the ground and the base up in the air." And and it's ridiculous to think that we could build things opposite of the way the world lays itself out. So uh, I feel like I'm going to end up talking. I want to say something that you are intrigued by, but I'll just keep going.
talk away. It's your time, Tom.
Okay. Yeah. So so my ideas was I wanted to get to story, because story, we talk a lot about narrative, and we're living stories. And I actually preach at a church, and I have for 6 years, which is another strange, wonderful thing that happened to me. I These paths that I stumble into, it's wonderful. I youth pastored for 15 years, and then there's an overlap. And for the past 6 years, I've been preaching at a small church, a Methodist church with maybe 30 people, and there are a lot of gray hair. I'm one of the youngest in the congregation, and uh, I'm older than you by a little bit. So stories, and so Chesterton flipping things upside down, and then the the thing I wanted to talk about was how I think that stories, I don't think we understand them well, and it's because the strangeness of the world, and Vervaeke is trying to get to that, Peugeot is trying to get to that, Chesterton. And I just saw Sam was doing a talk about uh, Harry Potter. They were doing a conversation about Harry Potter, and so I'm thinking about all these stories, and I think about Lord of the Rings. And when you preach, you sit there and you're wrestling with material and thinking, what can I say? How do I make sense of this? And say something that's interesting, at least to me. I would like to listen to me talk.
Yeah, if you're bored with your own sermon, there's a real problem. So at
Yes.
least, I mean,
Yeah.
at least there should be one person in the room that's interested in what you're saying.
I'm
And if it
laughing
ain't
at my
you, the sermon is in real trouble.
yes. So I think my jokes are funny, and I think my presentation is whatever. So the stories, so I'm thinking about these stories. So Lord of the Ring, or whatever, Lord of the Rings. The idea that these characters were following Frodo along, and there's the king, all these characters, and they stand, they're the hierarchical characters, or the, what do you call the character who's the peak character. But the whole story is laid on. So we watch stories, and we're looking at narrowing in on this tiny space because of the combinatorial explosiveness or whatever,
Yeah.
and we follow Frodo.
Yeah.
But the story has thousands of players that get no attention, because you
Yeah.
can't tell a story with thousands of players. And that's what you're doing, is letting these thousands speak up a little. And to me, it's the Chesterton. So you have, say, a president, or I like Lincoln. Lincoln is this character in the Civil War that's at the very top of the pyramid,
Yep.
and he's the one you're watching. He gets all the attention,
Yep.
and the whole war is carried on by the tens of thousands
Yep.
of people
Yep.
that are building the pyramid.
Yep.
And it's strange that we can only watch the star because
Yeah.
they guide us.
Yeah.
But I think that there's something happening that I would like to dig into a little, and it's that all these players, all these people who are telling their story are doing things that they don't understand.
Yes.
And whatever Frodo did, these giant armies fighting orcs and whatever else, it's this whole giant thing that we can't even begin to imagine what's going on with our own story.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that heavenly reveal one day when you see your story laid out and you get a well done, and people actually can listen and get some kind of understanding. I think it's going to be so remarkable.
Right. When you think about Amazing Grace,
Hmm.
and I mean, part of the reason I frame it this way is because so many people know the song Amazing Grace.
Right.
It's a hymn that just did, like, Psalm 23, Amazing Grace, 10
Right.
Commandments. These are things that broad numbers of people in the population know. When we've been
Right.
there 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun, we've no less days to sing God's praise than when we first begun.
Yes.
And you're exactly right about combinatorial explosiveness. Life is coming at us so fast, we simply can't pay attention to everything. And so you're exactly right. When it comes to the Civil War, Lincoln is way up there at the top. Actually, my wife and I started watching this show on Netflix that was, we saw a little bit of Alexander the Great. These shows are done so poorly so often. And then there was one on the Trojan War. She's a Waldorf teacher and she had to teach Greek mythology this year. So she's like, well, I'm doing that. So let's watch this. So we started watching this and I got so annoyed at it. And I said, well, even the 2004 or 5 movie Troy was a better show than this. So then we jumped to, oh, there's a director's cut. So then we're watching that. And and I got lots of criticisms about that one too, because none of these movie makers can help but just make all of their heroes American. And it's like, this is terrible. This is, you're just butchering this classic. And there Brad
Yeah.
Pitt has this speech about kings and generals and the soldiers. And it's a great point actually that he makes. And it's exactly the point that you made. When you think about the Civil War, there's very little time in our attention, very little bandwidth in our attention to look at anyone, let's say, other than Lincoln. Unfortunately,
Right.
Lincoln is such an interesting character, but
Yes, I love Lincoln.
let's
Yes.
say someone who's has a family story that intersects with the Civil War, then suddenly the salience landscape changes, and now they see the Civil War through another lens.
Hmm.
And I think part of what we have to look forward to in the age to come is actually an unpacking of this age in a proper way. Because of
Yeah.
course, when you think about God isn't limited to our combinatorial explosiveness. It's not that
Right.
God can't clearly generate a story or the Bible wouldn't be as it is, but that in fact, just as you said, we are all participating in things that we are generations deep into this, and we are, Lord willing, participating in generations to come at levels
Hmm.
that we simply can't understand. And
Right.
so, the hubris that we have about our agency is
Yeah.
just shockingly it's just shocking,
Overblown. Yeah.
overblown. Yes. So no, I like your point.
Yeah.
I like your point. It's a good point.
So what I want to do, I thought about my channel. So like everybody, I'd like to do the same thing, and I'm working on trying to get some kind of channel going. And
All right.
it would be shaped the way, to me, it wouldn't be, well, we'll see if I ever do it, because I've had false starts on and off again.
Well, that's
But
you don't have any starts if you don't have false ones. I
right.
mean, you
Yes.
gotta, if you're ever
Yeah.
gonna do anything, usually have to, oh, you know
Yes.
this, you gotta try and
Yeah.
fail a lot before you actually
Right.
manage to do anything.
Right. And I think about these gymnasts, and you see them stick a landing, and it's like, yeah, that's because 10,000 of them, they landed on their face.
That's right.
And
That's why they have that mat
it's,
there.
it's brutal. Yeah. So my ideas were that I think I want to get to the end where I really want to call to the corner and say, you guys don't understand the heroic work you're doing, because
Mm,
all the work is done at the base of the pyramid. We're carrying a lot, and
mm,
we just can't understand it. And I thought about the two worlds mapping, and that you just did with, I think you did that with Chesterton as well. But you say these different things, and as I preach, I feel like we're stuck. So we're in this place where we have to, Peterson wants you to, and I've listened to self-help books before, and to me they're a waste of time, because I think self-help books are for the top 10% that want to organize and achieve, because they're always achieving phenomenal success if you will do these things.
yeah.
And I think most people do those things in this base of the pyramid way, that they have to go to work and, haul trash, and they are working hard. But you can't have everyone at the top of the pyramid,
Yeah.
otherwise the base would be at the top. But that, I want to get to that idea that Jesus is flipping things too, and the last shall be first. So there is an inversion of some sort that can't work in this world, because we're stuck in a world where we have to be heroic, and we have to work with people who don't agree with Jesus to try and make a world good, to be salt on the main dish is this meat, and we're little flecks that add a little flavor, but the bulk of the world is this event which we can't participate in. And our heavenly goal, I feel like we're stuck,
Mm,
that we have to work, and can't quite, can't do what we want. We can't do what we want.
mm,
We have to work in cooperation with people who don't agree with us.
yeah. Yeah.
Simply don't agree.
Yeah. Well, and in fact, we have to work with people who distrust us, hate
Yeah.
us, want to
Yeah.
undermine us, and in some extreme cases around the world, and it was very clear with Jesus, want to kill us.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's so funny when we get to, I'm going to talk to Aaron Wren a little bit later this week, and when we
Mhm.
get to, okay, so we're in a negative world, and it's like Jesus' teaching is for his disciples in a negative world. Do we think that America is more negative than the Roman Empire in the first century?
Yeah.
Hardly the case. Hardly the case.
No. Right. Right.
And in fact, we are living off the fruit of, it's Tertullian, the blood of the saints is the seed of the
Mm.
church. And we are
Yeah.
living the fruit of that. And yet the dynamic remains the same. That you phrased it very well, that we do our work amidst adversaries.
Yeah.
We
I
do.
was hoping I'd get some of those gold stars.
There you go. You got a gold star. No, that's right. And as
Yeah.
you said, I mean, part of the difficulty with respect to, there isn't just one pyramid, there are many pyramids working at the same
Right.
time.
Right.
And each of us in some ways are sort of at the, we every child is at the head of their own pyramid. When you see a 2-year-old
Yeah.
having a temper tantrum, they are the center of their little world. And a big
Yeah.
part of maturation is getting comfortable at lower levels of the
It's
pyramid.
coming down off of that mountaintop. Yeah, even seeing yourself well, and that idea that examine yourself and don't think you're better than others,
Yeah,
and be a servant. It's a
yeah,
crazy task.
yeah,
It's a crazy call.
yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, that was part of it. And the two worlds, the thing that I am now thinking of the world. So we have our eyes on heaven, and we have to be on earth. And it's like, you have to take your eyes off heaven. Our reward is later, or whatever that is.
Yeah.
But right now, it's just a mess, and we have to keep our eyes on earth. And there was a C.S. Lewis quote: uh, "Keep your eyes on heaven, you get earth thrown in. Keep your eyes on earth, and you get neither."
Yeah.
But I really think that we're stuck in some way, and we can have this heavenly goal, but we're planted in this world,
Yeah.
and it's hard to break out of that. But I was thinking, so I love the Garden of Eden idea, and heaven and earth are united in the garden, and then the fruit incident and the garden
The
agreement with the
fruit
serpent.
incident.
The incident, yes, that incident. So in some ways, heaven is now a distant. We're cast out of the garden, and that heaven and earth union is now distant, and we long for heaven.
Yeah.
But to me, and I listen to Tim Mackey a little bit too, and he doesn't have a hell. I don't have a typical hell doctrine, but now hell, it's now earth and hell,
Yeah.
and you can see people maybe camping against your door that are living in hell,
Yeah.
and hell is very real.
Yeah.
And whether it's eternal conscious torment or whatever, it's certainly
Or just the regular
a
kind we
long.
have right here, right now.
Yeah, it can be hellish,
Yeah.
and we long for that heaven connection, but at our best, we can glimpse God's glory,
Yeah.
and you see a sunset, and you're like, what in the world?
Yeah.
I can watch them every time, and they're just magnificent.
Yeah.
And then you see, the sun goes down, and there's a guy shivering in the gutter, and you're like, he's in some kind of hell,
Yeah.
and glory is distant, and he can't think about glory.
Yeah.
He's thinking about a fix, or whatever he's thinking about is, how do I perpetuate hell in this world?
Yeah.
So it's all interesting and strange.
Yeah, it's interesting as you're talking. I'm thinking about the fact that we find probably more people in hell in nursing homes than we find in the gutter. When
Yeah.
you go through a nursing home,
Mhm. Yeah.
it's rough. And
Hmm.
people look at people in the gutter and, oh, someone should do something about that. It's like, okay, well, tell me what you would do.
Yeah.
And you're gonna put them in the nursing home. There's all those people in their own little hell right there too.
Yeah.
And they're surrounded by minimum wage workers, and maybe if it's a good nursing home, the smell of urine isn't too bad, and maybe people
Mhm.
aren't screaming, and not too many people shuffling about in wheelchairs because they're disabled in their 50s by a stroke. And
Yeah.
oh boy, I'll tell you, a lot of
Yeah.
hell in this world.
Yeah. I did a funeral Friday, and it was a guy who had he was a farmer. So it's a man who wants to be about, working, and he lost the ability to walk. I think had a stroke, and he was in a wheelchair. And then he just went around in this nursing home and just ordered people around. And, he still was he was the boss. So
Yeah,
he still was accomplishing all these tasks, but the things that he loved were out of reach. So he had to
yeah,
do what was before him. And I
yeah,
think he was a lot to handle. So yeah, I visited him a couple times.
yeah.
So I didn't really know him. He's one of the members who isn't in the body directly, which
Right,
is where most of the people that I know.
right.
Yeah. So children in the least. So we had my niece sang the other day, and my niece had a fall and had a head injury,
Mm,
traumatic head injury that she is probably will. I don't know if she'll ever develop. She's, I think,
mm,
14, and she's starting to read, but she has the communication skills that are maybe of a 6-year-old or
mm,
something like that. But she can do things. She played piano,
mm.
and she played a few songs, and one was Amazing Grace, and you can hear Amazing Grace because the song is so well known.
Yeah,
But just pecking the notes, but just smiling. She's up there. She has a disability. The piano, our worship leader plays piano, and she's teaching. and probably had to be so overjoyed that her little student who has struggles just plucked out this little song.
Yeah.
And so you get this idea, okay, what's the inversion that Jesus does? The last will become the first.
Yeah.
And those who are in this, hurt position become healed. And so, you sit and preach and you think about things. And one of the things that I want to say is, so in church, I don't have anybody to talk to either. I call the people in the corner. We're just trying to find somebody who will listen to these weird ideas. So I'm talking to the local pastors because we have some meetings with our little cluster. And I want to tell them, we should talk about this stuff. We should do videos or whatever. And they're like, Kevin, none of it.
No, no, no. You can start an
But,
estuary group.
well, I want to. And I want to make a call out as I conclude the video because I want to. And I'm on the estuary thing. And I just, you're busy enough that it's hard to manage all these things. I'm not that good at managing. So I was telling the pastors, and I talked to people at church, and I asked them to give their testimony or do music or something like that.
Yeah.
So a child they're not good enough to stand up on a stage and sing that they will, impress us. And yet you get a little children's choir up there, and these kids are bringing something heavenly.
Yeah.
Because the kingdom of heaven belongs to them. And you're listening, you're like, they're terrible, but they're maybe better than anything I've ever heard.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
not they're not skilled performers.
No.
And I talk to people and so there's a lady that a couple times I said, you ought to, because I just want to hear myself say the ideas. You ought to come up and sing, because maybe someone would hear you sing. And she's like, no, I'm not good enough. I'm thinking, man, the whole gospel. Yeah, exactly. You're not good enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe not. But if you sang, maybe someone would see somebody taking such a risk and they're being so transparent that it might be the most beautiful thing that you ever see
Yep.
or
Yep.
that you've done. And it's strange because I think we're stuck in this world, and the best people we want to be in front, even in church. We don't want the off-key singers.
Yeah.
She knows she'll be judged and found wanting. And it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, that's the church does do that.
Yeah.
Because we're human. We're stuck in a world where only the best can perform, and I
Yeah.
better like it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's strange.
Well, it can be a blessing to be in a church where we basically have the willing, and they bring a
Yeah.
joyful noise, and
Yes.
then because they're the willing, everyone else receives their gift, and
Right.
and they're affirmed in it. And
Yeah.
as you well know, if your church gets to a certain size, there'll be aspirations of professional musicians, and because if you can up the quality of the
Right.
music, then maybe
Right.
you can begin to draw church attenders who come in and they hear the quality of the music and they're like, oh, this is quality music. I want to come back
Yes.
next week. And maybe you can get some momentum and you can
Yeah.
get going. And yeah, I'm certainly not going to judge any pastor that makes that decision. I completely
Right.
understand for very good reasons.
Yeah.
Yet I also like watching the people of God use their gifts, and
Mhm.
and even if a note isn't perfect or a song isn't complex or the newest thing,
Right.
well, I'll
That's a
I'll live with
possible.
that.
Yeah. Yeah. And a small church, you get what you get. There's not a lot of
Indeed, you
options.
do.
Yes.
Indeed, you
Which
do.
in some ways I want at the end of this, our little talk, and I don't know what time we're at here.
We're doing all right.
Okay. So at the end, I want to make sure I promote small church. So Yeah, so the idea, and you keep throwing these ideas around, and my idea, I always mention Mariah Carey just because she has this sweet voice. She's maybe getting a little past her prime, but I think one day in our heavenly realm, new heaven, new earth, Melody goes up. This young woman who's got a brain injury goes up and maybe plays a couple notes, and Mariah, the first will be last, the last first. Mariah takes this low position, maybe as a servant. She teaches kids, but that she would sit, and instead of everyone being in awe of her, she would look up and say, "That's the most beautiful thing I've ever heard."
Yeah.
And this flip that will happen and seems right, but for the life of us, we can't tell Mariah to sit down because there are some bad singers we would like to get a
Yeah.
chance.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's very
Yeah.
strange. We're stuck in this world.
Yeah.
And it works that way, that Mariah or whoever the great vocalists are, they get their place because they deserve it.
Yeah.
And even the gospel, it's like, I want what I deserve. Oh, I'm not too sure
Yeah.
I want what I deserve.
Yeah.
That's a strange thing too.
Yeah.
So there was that. So I got the children, and I wanted to talk about church. So the seeking wisdom. So we're in this place, and we're following Vervaeke and Peterson, and Vervaeke, this wisdom. He wants to find wisdom, and I'm thinking this is my kind of call to the corner. Is so I go to a church, and I actually told them Sunday I was going to be talking to Paul Vanderklay, and I went over a little bit of the spiel, and I said, you know what I'm going to say to people in this corner is, and I don't know what everyone's doing. Maybe they're all doing all the right things. I have no business telling anybody how
I
to do it.
highly doubt that. I mean, we're human beings. We're usually
Yes.
not doing all the right things.
Well, my thought was, if you're seeking wisdom, it's great to sit on the internet or listen to Vervaeke or even take classes. And this guy's a scientist on wisdom. He's a wisdom scientist. He's deconstructed it. He's looked at the little pieces of wisdom. I thought, you know what? If you're really seeking wisdom, this little corner, go to a small church with 30 people who are all 75, 80 years old.
Yeah.
It's just brimming with wisdom.
It is.
And if you go to a small church, you can actually work with people in this. You're welcome there.
Yep.
You can start expressing ideas, maybe get some leadership. Like you said, some of the guys were getting, I think, Chad and a couple people you said had gone to church and found themselves in leadership because the church is desperate for somebody to come in and do something. Because when you're 80, taking care of the building gets a little harder.
Yeah.
But if you went in with some kind of open mind and open heart and sincerely seeking wisdom, it's all around you all the time.
Yeah.
But they'll also let you take roles, because for me to come in and be a preacher, and I can't believe, it's always astonishing to me that people don't say, we've been listening to you talk for a long time. Why don't you sit down and let me talk? And they should be elbowing me out of the way, but people don't. They don't like standing in front.
Yeah.
But it's always shocking to me that they don't want to push me aside and say, I'd like to tell you about Jesus.
Yeah.
But I don't know, it's a strange calling or whatever it is. I feel like everybody should do this thing of talking and practicing saying what is you think really is true about the world.
Yeah.
And if you're lost, cry out. And if you're found, shout it out, say something, and embody.
Yeah.
For goodness sakes, embody.
Yeah.
So you can do that in a small church, and these small churches really do need some people to step up. So if you're in the Fredericksburg PA area, talking to your internet, which is near Lebanon and Hershey, PA, people know. But Fredericksburg is a chicken town. We have chickens everywhere. We crank out chickens. So Fredericksburg PA, go to Fredericksburg United Methodist and check us out.
All right. All right.
And
Well, we were doing we're doing our every Sunday morning estuary now.
Yeah.
And I was sitting watching. We had, let's see, we have a African American woman, probably in her late 70s, early 80s. I've never asked her how old she is. They've got
Mhm.
another young guy who comes to Estuary. He's, kind of, you know, late 20s, early 30s. Then we've got another guy who goes to a mega church, but he's a school teacher, just started as a school teacher, and they have a Bible club at school, and he found himself leading this Bible club at school, so figuring that out. And then we have two people from our church, both in their 70s, who are fairly freshly retired. And then we have, let's see who's sitting next to him. And then we've got another guy who's just started coming to church and he plays the piano. And then we've got Dave Dogbark, who, is in his 70s, and he's kind of new reprieve on life and doing music and stuff in the corner. And
Mhm.
we're just having this estuary conversation, and I just hear the wisdom. Oh, then we had another guy, Bowtie Brian, come in. He drove up from Southern California to go to church and
Uh-huh.
to be on the Freddie and Paul show this last week. And I'm just watching the wisdom flow. I mean, part of the reason that I really wanted to do this with at 9 o'clock was that I knew that this African American woman, she grew up in Jim Crow, Mississippi.
Mhm.
She's just brimming with wisdom. She's just got so much of it. I mean, she's got all these observations in life. And she had two sons here in Sacramento, and she gave a kidney to one of them because
Mhm.
he had an infection in his kidney or something. And so then he had one kidney transplant that didn't work out. So she gave him one of her kidneys, and she's just brimming with wisdom. And I knew that the estuary crew that came in at night, they'd never get to meet her because she'd never come in here at night. But I
Mhm.
thought, boy, if I moved estuary to 9 a.m., then they would get a chance to hear her stories. And they do. And
Mhm.
I just thought about the value of an estuary group in a congregation like, both of ours. Now, I had the benefit of, I have a, decent number of people who are coming to the estuary group from that have no church, that don't go to church at all, and some of them are younger and they're looking for wisdom. And I was just so gratified to watch the conversation, and it just flowed so naturally. They could ask her questions and she tells her stories, and they value and love each other. And she often thinks that she doesn't have anything to contribute, but she has so much stuff to contribute. It's just
Mhm.
sort of trying to create the environment where the wisdom will flow. And I've
Right.
just found that, estuary really does that well. So I've been super happy watching it happen.
Yeah. Hmm. Yeah. So that's, yeah, wisdom. It's out there, and I imagine it almost takes a little priming of the pump, because one of the things I see with some of the older people that I love is sometimes when they get talking, it's like they don't get a lot of chance to say their piece, and sometimes it comes out a little harsh and almost uh, disappointed with the world that is not hearing them out.
Yeah.
So you almost have to allow some settling in, that there's somebody that wants to talk to you. But that's part of that nursing home thing too, that there are people who, they have a lot to offer, they're overflowing,
Yeah.
and nobody's hearing. But that's even this little corner. So we
Yeah.
all, have things to say, and
Yeah.
it's hard to
Well,
find someone to listen.
some people are old and wise, and some people are just old. You find that
Yeah.
too.
Yes. Yes. Let's see now. I was going to talk about spirit. I can't tell what time it is though. Where are we at
We
here?
got another 15 minutes or so.
Okay. Well, I'll end up running out of things to talk about.
That's
No, I did
okay.
want to say maybe a little bit of the story again. I talked the other day. I had, so in our church cluster we do Lenten services. So there are 6 churches in the the 6 Wednesday night Lenten services. Each pastor gets to say one thing, so I get to preach in front of all the churches. And I'm a little quirky, so my church is used to it, but the rest of them, I was teaching. I was supposed to. We're doing God's love story, and it's in Romans. And we start with Ash Wednesday, so we get a little smudge on our head, and then we were going to try and get to this God's love story, and I was supposed to talk about wrath. And the other pastors, I don't think, wanted to talk about wrath, and I'm like, man, I'll talk about wrath. I know what that is. And what I wanted to get to was, there's times that you see God's wrath, and you have Sodom and Gomorrah, but even Jesus, you see Jesus talking to people and saying, "You better not mess with my little ones. It'd be better if you tied a millstone around your neck," which is pretty severe.
Yeah.
And he'll give some woes to
Yeah.
people, and he could bring it pretty hard.
Yeah.
And yet his whole goal was not to punch anyone.
Yeah.
So I talked about, punch and take his sword and just start slashing. Because I love those movies where justice is brought hard. And I wanted to think of a couple of movies. Now, I don't know if you watched the new Reacher on
Yeah.
Prime.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've seen it.
So
Yeah.
he
The
was
first
gonna be
season
my
was better
guy.
than the second.
Yeah, first one was good. The second, I couldn't quite. I didn't enjoy it as much.
No, the first was good. The
So
second season was
yeah,
like,
yeah. But even you talked to a guy one time, and he talked about the hero having to go into the sunset and not get the family because his work is to bring justice, and
yeah.
he has to kill, and then he has to kind of go. He's the hero we deserve. I talked about True Grit because
Yeah.
I thought everyone would know John Wayne.
Yeah.
And when Maddie was looking for somebody to be her hero, she said, "Well, who's the best marshal?"
Yeah.
And the guy came up with 3 names, and John Wayne was the meanest. And she said, I think I'll take that guy," because she's not interested in anything except somebody to bring wrath.
Yeah.
And and that and that I think it's absolutely the most understood thing in the world, because I think we're so stuck in this world, and we would like to say, no, if somebody slaps me, I will turn the other cheek. But I think wrath is really part of we understand it. An intruder comes in to my house and threatens my girls. If I got a club,
Yeah.
I will take a shot.
Yeah.
I hope I will.
Yeah.
So we understand wrath, and Reacher's brother gets killed, and there's not going to be anything standing between him and killing everybody who's involved.
Yeah.
So we get that.
Yeah.
And but we're stuck in this world, and to me, it's a very patriotic church too. So there's a lot of military and honoring that type of thing. And Jesus didn't have a problem with soldiers at all, and they in some way are this. Chesterton has another quote that is something like, "Soldiers don't fight because they hate what's before them, but because they love what's behind them."
Yeah.
And it's this sacrificial thing. Okay, there's danger. I'll go and be willing to sacrifice my life. So it ties in to a world that we can't quite figure out, that you're willing to make a sacrifice for some good. So that's some, I don't know, a little glimpse of justice or wrath on our enemy. But I feel like one of the things Jesus is calling us to is this loving of an enemy. And I don't know, I don't think we can play that out well when the guy's got a knife or is threatening. It's the fight or flight. I don't know that I feel like we're so embedded in the world, it's hard to live that out. And when it comes down to it, like Maddie calling on John Wayne, she says, the only thing free is grace and God's grace, or something like that. She's going to pay, and she's going to say, "I'm not interested in grace. You sit down, Jesus, because I need somebody who will do this job.
Yeah.
And you didn't do it." So we can't even honor Jesus right in some way because we want justice. And if it takes hiring Reacher or John Wayne, we're like, we need the hero we deserve,
Hmm.
the Batman character, the hero we need. It's hard to connect with him when we're in this world where you've got to club somebody because he's stealing a social security check from a little old lady.
Yeah.
You got to take him out. So that's part of the hellishness of this world, is we can't figure it out right. We
Yeah.
can't tell what story is playing.
Yeah.
And for us to die, it's like, no, that story doesn't sound right.
Yeah.
It's very strange.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And how these stories relate to each other.
Mhm.
Because you're right, the same Jesus that says it would be better for a millstone to be tied around their neck and to be cast into the sea is the same Jesus that says, Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they do. I mean,
Right.
it's the same Jesus. It's this it's these diverse excellencies that
Mhm.
that Jonathan Edwards talked about. That how can, and you see this in, I mean, you have the Gospels and you have the Book of Revelation,
Mhm.
and you
Yeah.
have, in the Book of Revelation, where the great and the small, the call upon the mountains to fall on them, because
Mhm.
save us, hide us from the face of the one on the throne and the wrath of the Lamb. The wrath
Mhm.
of the Lamb. Just think about that. My wife and I were driving through the country yesterday, and it's, spring comes early in California, and
Mhm.
there's these sheep and there's little lambs running around, and the last thing you think about wrath when you see a little lamb walking around.
Yeah.
But
Not a wrathful creature.
the Bible
Yeah.
takes all of these images and it just puts them there, and
Yeah.
we try to figure out how it works,
Mhm.
and we're really bad at it,
Yeah.
but they're all there.
Yeah. Yeah. So the last thing I'll get your take on. Oh, I just want to say one more time, little corner, go to a small church, because
and
you will
and
be able
it's
to get wisdom. Yeah.
and especially a church in
In Fredericksburg, PA.
Fredericksburg, PA. There you go.
Fredericksburg, PA.
Yeah, you got a zip code?
17026.
17026. Look for a small Methodist church,
Yeah.
Pennsylvania,
Mhm.
17026. There you go.
So even so, I was going to tell maybe a little of the story. So my life continues to cycle through these just disasters, and I'm in some rebuilding stage now. And at the end of it, hopefully, I'll have a little studio where I can do some YouTube videos, and I'll be YouTube famous by then, because this is my big break right here.
All right.
So I wanted to talk about one more thing. So you were talking about spirit and what are spirits, and uh, so because I preach and I'm reading these texts and trying to study and figure out what to say about them, and the texts are remarkable, and I'm starting to do a Bible study, and I just want to read. I just want to read through the gospel. So we read Mark, and Mark is terrific. It's easy to read. 16 chapters, you blow through it. And I don't want to use commentaries or anything. I would like to just say, what are you hearing? Because as if my Bible study is this little corner, and I need to do the estuary protocol and understand whatever that is, because I can't get anyone to talk except me. Well, people will talk once in a while when something interesting strikes them,
Yeah.
but I talk all the time. I'm pretty talkative. So one of my ideas is reading scripture out loud. So you don't know what happens when you read. You go to your backyard, you read Mark out loud, and who knows if somebody's listening. I don't know what's going to happen, but I feel like people should do that. But one of the things that I was thinking about is this Holy Spirit, the Spirit that moves people, the Spirit that was available, the Spirit that blew. Who are the prophets when Jesus goes to the temple? It's Anna and
Simeon.
Simeon. Yeah. So Simeon gets, in some way, he's blown into the temple, and the Holy Spirit's moving him. and he sees the consolation of Israel and says, I can die now. Good enough. I've seen what you promised. And then Anna, who never leaves the temple, starts telling everybody. And I feel like the spirit blows her out into the world or whatever happens. You don't really know exactly. So the spirit's always moving around and like the wind. And I'm not a great theologian. I didn't go to a seminary or anything. I'm just some dude who gets to preach, which is crazy. I'm telling you, in small churches, you can find openings that are
Indeed you can. Indeed you
yes,
can.
that are amazingly fruitful and bless you. But so the spirit, and I'm thinking, even as you know, we read this scripture and it's remarkable. The stories are so, you know, compact, compressed, that Jordan Peterson will talk for an hour and a half on,
Yeah.
you know, the brothers fighting
Yeah.
Cain and Abel, and he like lays out a story that's one paragraph. It turns into a book. But the idea that to me, people still have this revelation. They have things happen, and we don't know. Even if you write a song, or even in this conversation, when Vervaeke's telling you exactly how the brain functions, whatever it is, things are falling into my head and snapping into place, and we're able to communicate over distance. And there's, what in the world is it that can move through us, and we can get the, you know, have this connection, this spiritual connection, and it's strange, and I don't think we can capture it. And even if you read uh the thing I'm wrestling with now is how full of the spirit people are. So I go in and preach, and I feel like I have the Holy Spirit doing something in me. I'm saying words that uh talking about Jesus. So there seems to be some influence there. And yet I'm not like a Baptist guy. I'm not healing anybody. I'm not shouting out. I'm not wild. I'm a little timid. And even in Acts, well, all through the Gospels, the disciples are just kind of clueless. And I just love that. I say thank you, because I'm clueless. And then even afterwards, after Jesus rises, they look back and they remember, oh yeah, he said, tear this temple down. I just did that in uh, in John, maybe. Tear this temple down and I'll rebuild it. And they're like, oh yeah, he said that. It was his body. And then they receive the Holy Spirit, and then filled with the Holy Spirit, Peter, has a vision. And after denying Jesus 3 times, he has a vision of this sheet that comes down, and he denies 3 times. I'm not going to do that. Whoever's talking to me, it seems like it's a God thing, but still denies, still as surprised as anything that, oh, this message is being received by the Gentiles. It's like, yeah, that's the whole story from Abraham. You're going to do something that the whole world is going to be blessed by. And he's like, yeah, I don't know if I want to sit with Gentiles. This spirit-filled guy is still, it still seems to ebb and flow.
Yeah.
And I don't know how,
Yeah.
Catholic, how popish he was, if he was really the guy who the spirit settled on and never left. He was always spirit-filled. He always had the right things to say. I love that he still seems to kind of not always know what he's doing.
Yeah.
So to me, that's another stickiness of the world,
Yeah.
that what we are grasping for, or what God is doing through us, is this long growth, like you're planting a tree, and it's a long time growing, and you want to grow.
Yeah.
I would like to provide some shade right now,
Yeah. Yeah.
but I'm not very shady yet, or maybe a little too shady. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. And
So it's all fascinating. Yeah.
yeah. Well, he uses us as he chooses to.
Yeah.
And we
And a lot of us, yeah.
we evaluate from, we talked earlier about these hierarchies. We don't see the whole
Mhm.
thing. We just see the little bit that we can see from where we are right here.
Yeah.
And, when we've been there 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun, I think we'll see a little more.
Yes. Yeah.
So
And even then, 10,000 years, that song is so interesting because all the things on your bucket list, it seems to me, a new heavens and earth, 10,000 times 10,000 or however long
yeah,
to turn.
yeah,
It's like,
yeah,
so I would talk to students. We're about that time, huh?
yeah.
I would talk to students and they would think that heaven might be boring. And it's like, dude, do you like skateboarding? Yeah. Would you like to jump off the Niagara Falls into the water? Yeah. Would you like to surf? Would you like to ride a dolphin? Would you like to go to the moon? You could. The earth is so filled with glory,
Yeah.
and in some ways, we get our little worlds get very narrow,
Yes, they do.
and that the students, anybody who thought it'd be boring to have an endless bucket list, it's like, no, I think it'll be all right.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it'll be all right
I
too.
I forgot to put my headphones on. I hope it. I guess Zoom does
No,
some. Zoom
no.
cuts off. Yeah,
Yeah, you're
I was
fine.
gonna
You're
put
fine.
headphones. Yeah.
No, that's fine. I wear headphones
Okay.
just because
Yeah.
I do it so often and it just, but most of the
Well.
time when people don't use headphones, it works just fine. So,
Okay. Very good.
well, Tom, you better
Yeah.
you better tell us, someone, small church, Methodist church,
Yes.
Pennsylvania.
Fredericksburg 17026. Come down to Fredericksburg UMC.
What time's your Sunday morning
And
service?
9 a.m. Come on out. You'll listen to me, which may or may not be your favorite, but for goodness sakes, lend a hand.
There
Brothers
you
and
go.
sisters, go somewhere small where it's filled with wisdom
Yeah.
and listen and lend a hand.
Yeah. Yeah. That sounds about right. That sounds about
Yeah.
right. Well, thank you, Tom. It was a joy
You're welcome,
talking
Paul.
to you. I'll probably take
Good.
our first talk and put it on the end of it, like I've done recently with some of
Okay.
the second talks, and
Yeah.
we'll see what people have to do. Maybe somebody's going to take your your address and your zip code giving and turn that into branding. Who knows?
All right. I don't know.
Take care, Tom.
Okay. Thanks, Paul.
Have a good
See ya.
evening.
You
Bye-bye.
too. Bye. Used to be here.
Well, I'm glad we finally get a chance to talk again.
Yes. Do you recall that so many years?
That was when I read the description,
Yeah.
I vaguely recalled it. So, and now
Yeah.
seeing your face, I recall it more.
Well, that's an amazing memory because my whole story is going to be somebody who cannot remember the past for the life of me. And the discussions that you have with people, your remarkable memory and ability to pull everything you've ever learned. And it's Jordan Peterson-esque that you are delighted with him and have some kind of similar. I don't know if I'm using my.
You sound okay.
Well, okay, because I was going to put I was connected with this to my computer, but it seems like it's going through the computer. So
I've got, hang on a second. I had a date confusion with a rando who stopped by.
okay.
Got technical things going on. Hang on a second. I'll get it fixed up right.
You're having the technical difficulties I wish I had. I think from you, I felt like this is a direction that I have to go, and I'm, somewhat forward thinking. So I want to do it, but I also struggle with getting things in place without someone helping me. That this kind of ministry is. I just love what you do.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, let's start with a little bit of biography from you, and then you can take it wherever you want to take it.
I wrote it all down because I had to ask my sister some questions about my own childhood because I couldn't remember.
That's dangerous. So, if I asked my sister questions about my childhood, she would give me answers, and I know they would very much be
shaded a little.
Oh, my sister, it's like we grew up with two different worlds. She'll tell stories and it's like, that didn't happen.
Yeah. I just watched a video about Calvin and Hobbes, and he was talking about how he presented Hobbes as both a toy or a stuffed animal and a live animal. And when he's questioned, it's that we think it's all Hobbes' imagination or Calvin's imagination, but he said, no, I want to present that the world is seen by different people in different ways, and everybody else sees. But it wasn't just Calvin's mind that he was playing off of. It was that the world is interpreted, and your sister, would see the world of Paul Vanderklay as
Yes, she
something
does.
you don't remember.
She does. She has a YouTube channel and a podcast too. And apparently one of the podcasts, she told her story and my mother listened to it and she said, oh, you got to listen to it. So I should listen to it sometime. I'm sure I would listen to it and say, no, it wasn't like that.
Right. Yeah. Well, my thing is, so I'm 60. What is today? 2021. I'm 61. So I've had a long history, and it's a history that where I guess I've always struggled to remember, but I credit a lot with some segment of my life being involved with drugs, and maybe a little too much things playing on my own memory, which is one of the symptoms or one of the consequences. But anyway, my past. So I moved to Pennsylvania. I'm in Pennsylvania. I moved from Indiana to Pennsylvania when I was about 13. But before, I don't consider myself churched. I consider myself familiar with Christianity. My dad was plugged into some different things, seeking out this Jesus or this, who's in charge here. In his own childhood, I have him in my house now. At the beginning of January, my mother had, and both of them had COVID. My mother was hospitalized and she passed in January. So then I'm somebody who tries to figure things out and put together the pieces. And I brought my dad in and we sold his house. And now I'm trying to put that piece together, which is very complicated. And dad who's distant is way more pleasant and comfortable than dad who's close. And that's a sign of, it tests your, how much are you like Jesus? It turns out, maybe not much.
Dostoevsky made that observation that it's always easier to love in the abstract.
Oh yeah. Yeah. As it turns out, you might be right. So I don't think I was real churched. My sister reminded me that we did go to church, but for the life of me, I don't remember church, Sunday school. Don't remember it. Came to Pennsylvania. So kind of a very working class, probably close to the lower class level. And that was, I think, common back in the 60s when my dad was a truck driver and maybe worked at a couple of factories, but mostly he's been a truck driver. And played in the neighborhood. That's what we did. Moved to Pennsylvania and got caught up in the drug world. It's the 70s, for goodness sakes. And all that is rampant.
Now, when you say in the drug, I mean, what, I don't want to be too nosy, but there's lots of different kinds of drugs. I mean, psychedelics are over here and then.
Yeah, well, I'm one of the guys who knows about psychedelics. And I played the whole gamut. And as it turns out, the way I tell my story, because I like to talk to students and some of the dramatic things will catch their attention. And so I was talking, and I have to mention the Scooter Gang, who's I'm a youth leader. So the Scooter Gang is one of my ministry outreach things. And I want to mention them because they might watch the video. So the Scooter Gang in our church is called the Grind Church. So it's where they go and go grind on the sidewalk. So the Grind Church, that's where
Wow.
Yeah. So I came to Pennsylvania and I got, to me, smoking and all these things where you're using substances that aren't natural. So to me, I get that it's a gateway. Not everybody says that, but to me, like anything you explore, once you are in the door, you find, are there other things that are, that can advance my interest? So smoking and marijuana is an easy entrance, and then speed, amphetamines, and then just continuing to advance. And to me, all people like to get better at what they're doing. And it doesn't matter what your hobby is. To me, you try and get better and you want to perform well. So that's even, to me, abusers are, they get caught up in something and they're with the cool kids and whatever. And then, somebody says, well, this is pretty good. So I did everything except shooting up, because that seemed like the line that was where you're turning into a pro and you start beating up old ladies and stealing. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not a good kid, but I don't want to go to jail. I have some kind of nose for trouble. And you could always see when things are getting, when tempers are flaring and you see a fight coming and you're like, oh, I'm not really a fighter. I think I'll take a few steps back. So I always had a nose for the appearance of a good kid or whatever, but I'm sneaky and I'm just playing whatever. So that was a good portion of my life. So I wanted to get through that. But then what happened
when you
was,
say a good portion of your life, how much of a
14,
okay,
14 to about 27. And at some point in there, I met Jesus around 24 years old. So I'll get to that. Is
okay.
The thing that when you're a user or an addict, and I don't claim, addiction's a funny thing, but when you're a user, you can see what's going on.
Yeah.
And you only have to fool one person. If you're saying, no, I'm fine, you can see this probably isn't wise. And I would sit up when you do cocaine. One of the weird things is there's something called the cocaine blues. It's a bit of a pricey drug. It's a great natural feeling, exuberant high. But then about 3 a.m. when you've blown about $300 and there's nothing left, it's not long lasting. And then all of a sudden the reality, because you never escape, you never change your life. You start getting this, well, I'm out of drugs. My life's the same. Now I'm a little broker and I'm with somebody who's kind of fun to hang out with when you're both on drugs or whatever. So you get the blues kind of. So where was I going with that? So I'm doing this stuff. Oh, and then so I'm doing everything that I can. But then about 24 years old, I think it was then that I started trying to escape. And I was thinking, I got involved in truck driving a little bit, and with my dad, he gave me the start. And it was a 2-man crew that set up equipment to hold carpet or vinyl rolls that you'd see at any vinyl store, or Lowe's or wherever. So I get involved in that, trying to escape. And then I get introduced to Jesus by a couple friends who are in the crowd that I'm hanging with. They're people who are using, and kind of a party crowd. And one of them he's like in an adopted home, or his parents are there, but he's with an aunt and uncle or something like that. And he goes to church, and maybe he invited me or he told me something about Jesus. And I'm like, yeah, I need some aim. And it's the hierarchy. You see the good person that you want to follow. I'm like, yeah, I'm interested in that. And another guy had come out of Teen Challenge, which is nearby where I live. He was a graduate, and he was doing drugs with me because he graduated, but it didn't change anything. Because he could talk the talk. He was some kind of scammer. He could talk the talk, and he would give me the spiel because he could tell me what the program taught him. And I'm like, wow, you're laying that out, and it's pretty convincing. So in some way, I'm introduced to Jesus at about 24. And then I really start trying to think, what do I do to change things? And I think that's when I got into truck driving. I broke out of the AA idea of people, places, and things that trap you in the world. If you can get away from those, it gives you a clearer head. It can, you can change your life. You can't if you're still hanging out at the bar with all your buddies. You're going to drink some booze. So I tried to escape a couple times. I'd live on the road for a while, I'd come back home, and I'd hang out with the people, places, and things. And it wasn't really working. And then at about 27, after really a pretty long commitment, and then I was trying to kind of break free. And I don't believe, addiction is a weird thing to talk about. I believe I was making choices almost all the time, because I quit smoking. You know, you can break addiction, but it's hard and it depends on your personality and whatever. I don't know. So I'm 27, and then at one party, at some point a year or so previous, there were a couple girls, and Shelly was this just beautiful young woman, and my buddy was talking to her, and I'm like, oh, I'm turned into the wingman, and I'm like, and I never had this great connection with figuring out women. Still don't, as it turns out. So Shelly and Ron, and I don't know if you would ever hear this, but it was a turning point when Shelly and Ron get engaged, and they're getting ready to be married, and they're a young couple, and she's just delightful, just bubbling, effervescent, you know, pretty, and everything, you know, that is appealing.
Yeah.
And then at one point, I get a phone call that Shelly's killed in a car crash, and like 2 weeks before they're to get married. And so again, every time I tell the story, still, it's, you know, it just comes back, and I'm ready to cry. But so I go to Ron, and it's the first time I get this kind of view into the, you know, the eyes, the window of the soul, and you're looking deep into this place that's just been emptied, and it's you know, it's very tragic. You see it live it out. So yeah. So the pastor who was going to wed them performed the funeral, and Ron wasn't my close friend, but he was in the group of people, and I knew him. And at that time, I wanted to serve Jesus in some way. I didn't know what that was, and I'm not giving myself much credit, but I thought when I saw him, I had no words. I couldn't say anything that could be of any use. I'm just, you know, all you say is I'm sorry, and I had nothing to do with it, but I don't know what to do. So I decided, well, I'll hang with Ron for a while he just sits in this grief and wrestles. And we went out to the intersection. You know, he's looking for some reason. Who can I blame? What can I say about this? And we just hang out. And all of a sudden, Ron's going to church with this pastor. And all of a sudden, I'm introduced to the church in a way that's new. Whatever my childhood was, all of a sudden now I'm thinking, well, I love people. And here's all these people that want to commune with Jesus. I'm like, I'm in. I'll party with you in the way you party. You know, you're loving each other, you're having fun, you're doing missions, you have game nights or whatever. And I'm planted. And since that time, I'm a church man. It's like I am all in. And the strange thing is, the church in '87 is I'm kind of a hippie looking dude. I played guitar. I just that was the end of my drug use. It was just people, places, and things completely changed. None of them were smoking weed that I know of. But that it was a time well before any, you know, processing of how can we give this person a leadership role. I got right into youth ministry, and it's like from drug user right into youth ministry, no background check. He seems okay. and that's the world of that time. It wasn't a scared world. It was a, you know, still daring and bold people, sort of, whatever it was. So then I got into youth ministry, and I was in music ministry, and I was everything they did. I said, yeah, I'll help with anything you're doing, VBS, mission trips. So then I moved along in that route and ended up going to another church that was just closer, and a pastor who was ready to plug people in, and he plugged me into the youth group. And I've been a youth leader for 33 years.
Wow.
A youth leader of some sort. But still, the same person. You know, you grow up, and I struggled in school. I got caught up in drugs, so I'm some quirky youth leader that not everyone's on board with what I'm saying we should do. But you're talking about these wrestling issues, and a lot of things you said I'm playing off the video that you did. It was about 4 videos ago, and I actually am following closely all this world. I'm one of the people who is watching every video that you do, the 3-hour ones, and then I tell other people to watch.
There are
But
about
I'm
2 to
alone.
3,000 of you that watch almost all the
Yeah.
videos. It's really
Yeah.
bizarre. I can't figure it out.
Well, it really fits everything that I'm questioning are the things that you're talking about. And it was Peterson, but I think you're more than Peterson because you're staying the course and you're walking people through it. And in some way, Peterson is a rock star, and you watch a concert and you're like, hey, I might or might not have his poster on the wall. I actually do not. But the real thing is if you watch a rock band, but then somebody, a friend of yours will play music with you, and you'll sit around a campfire and actually play music. It's music that you want. So the wrestling is what we want, and you're actually committed for the long term. And Peterson has his own things he has to do. But your video a couple videos ago, I watched it like 4 times because I'm like, or 6 times, I don't know.
Which video was this?
It was the one about politics being the death of the church. And
yeah.
And you talked about some things I'm interested in. And what I want to talk about, one of the things I thought was interesting is when you talk, you'll do an interview with a rando. So you did the interview with Nick, and you went through some real interesting wrestling. But then you not only talk with Nick, but then you talk about your talk with Nick. And then you think, what is it all? And that's the thing that was interesting. So I want to get to that talk. There's something I want to add there. But you also talked about pastors and the ones who are gifted, because we're looking at this hierarchy and we're seeing people who we want to emulate, and your church planner discussion. And, why can't I plant a church? Because I ended up being a youth leader. And about 4 years ago, someone clued me in that if I would get in, I'm in the Methodist church. And, I'm actually a follower of Jesus, and I'd go anywhere because I was in a UCC church. Then I was in a Methodist church. I have friends who are in different churches, but I'm a paid staff, which is a unique gig, and which is the delight of my life to be thinking about and be with young people and try and tell them about the greatest joy they can have, or can you find any place that you can open your heart and not have someone stab it, or what is it that we have to guard our hearts so carefully? What even are they that you don't dare reveal them except to Jesus? Or you try and get to that point. It's a long process. In my scooter gang, I'm trying to connect to them, and they're not hanging at the church, the grind church, to hear Jesus stories. But I'm like, look, you're grinding on my sidewalk. I'm going to tell you a little story. and they're
grind if you can't do the time.
So you get to that stuff. But so a few years back, let's see, I think I got through everything in my childhood. So now we're at now. A few years back, someone said if I would get into the program, the Methodists have you can be an ordained elder and go through seminary and whatever. And I'm some guy who finds back doors. I'm the guy who's playing the system in some way and just looking like a nice guy. And I'm like, yeah, you can trust him. Sure, he just came off of years of whatever. But you can trust him. So 4 years ago, they said if I get in the local licensed pastor program, there may be an opening, an opportunity for me to pastor, because I started looking around for places to rehearse or practice giving testimony, because I want a little more. I want to practice. So I gave testimony in another church, and then someone told me, given the program, and then an opening for a quarter-time pastor opened up right next door, a couple miles down the road. And I got plopped in there as someone who's in the program, but is not in any way. It's like my youth ministry. They plop me in, and I'm like, I'll do it. And now every week at quarter time, there's very little expectations outside of preaching. I'm like, well, I can try and tell the gospel and practice. And it's another thing that's, there's no way I belong in this course, because I aim for nothing like this. I don't even know where I'm aiming. And when Peterson talks about going through a field and you have to have you're aiming somewhere. I'm just meandering around. I'm looking at butterflies. And I keep landing in places that are so wonderful for me. And it's, this ministry at the church, to preach every week. Even if you're not good at it, if you want to do it, you'll get better.
Yeah.
But even if you want to do it, and even if you have, I tell them this, look, if I was a ball player and I got one little bloop single every 3 at bats, I'd be $1 million player.
Yep.
So I need to get one good sermon, maybe out of 3, maybe out of 4. I'm a pro, and they don't even have to be good at bloop single. I walk on base. Whatever the standards are in the world, it's very strange. And I wanted to get to the other thing, so I told you about that. So I want to let you talk a little bit, because I want to wrestle with you a little bit about this idea of hierarchies. Because one of the things I keep talking about is I'm some kind of average character, and I get into positions that are like, there's no way I was aiming for it. I was not well trained for it. And I'm not the dude at the church who's the big guy that you were talking about in that video, the church pastor who got kicked out and started another 2000.
Oh, Driscoll,
yeah. And I've watched Driscoll, and he's got a gift.
Oh yeah.
So, and in some way, people want to emulate that. And the same with the other 2 pastors you talked about. It's not going to come to me, but you talked about mega church pastors, and they're at the top of the hierarchy, and everyone wants to be like them. And I'm thinking, what do you do with the people that aren't going to be like them? How do you say you can be a scrub player and work with Jesus, tell these stories, and it's the bottom of the hierarchy? And I'm thinking of a pyramid. I'm like, the whole pyramid rests on all of the people who aren't good enough, and will never get up that pyramid.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about that idea of Jesus calling people to be, to lose their life, or to the first shall be last.
Yeah.
And I've just got a couple of stories with that, but that's the thing I'm trying to figure out. How do I say something about people giving up things that the hierarchy is really for succeeding in this world, and giving up on that success, coming back down the pyramid, is part of the gospel. And I think that's one of the things that we're stuck with in churches that have not told the right message, because we want to be good people, and that means getting better at getting to the more like Jesus, because Jesus is at the very top. And I think you get there at the top and you're like, Jesus, I am so close to you right now. And he's at the bottom saying, no, I'm way down here.
Yeah.
And whatever you're doing is a Tower of Babel, or, and even Peterson building from the ground up, when the miracle happens from, some mystery that God drops on you.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that was the main thing that I wanted to get to, was this flip. And I want to get to something with Nick too, but I want to not talk the whole time.
I get to talk lots. I have hours of me talking on my channel. I like listening to you. I'm going to do today. I'm going to record it's 3+ years into my channel, and I haven't recorded an introduction video to explain my channel to people, which is a real problem. So I'm going to do that today. But this to me is a high point of the week, getting to hear your story and getting a vision. Yeah. But what you say about the hierarchy is just so true. And it's part of the reason I, if you gain a degree of celebrity, even tiny little internet celebrity. So my sister Ruth was talking about how she does, her YouTube channel is on, right now it's on Primitive Home. It's been on 2-3 different things over the last while. And she goes into people's houses, and it's decorating the certain style, and she takes videos. And so she went somewhere. And so her name is Ruth Huizinga, but on her YouTube, she's Ann Clay, just kind of riffing off her maiden name and her middle name and her maiden name. And so someone's like, oh, Ann Clay's here. And she's like, she's loving the celebrity. But even if you have a little bit of celebrity, people will, want to meet you, and all that's wonderful. But the real joy for me is introducing people like you to the rest of the world, because the truth is what you say about the pyramid is exactly right. And to me, churches that I've been in, so often it's and I can name people from Livingstone's story here, who these are salt of the earth people. They give, they sacrifice, they loved. One guy that I baptized in his 70s, actually, his name was HJ. And, it's just, I remember coming to the church fairly early. His wife had been coming to church. She was a ER nurse. And she just didn't have patience for fools. And so back when I got here at the church, I had to, part of my job was I had to pick songs for the service. And so I did. And there was this other, Nina was picking songs for this crazy stuff in churches. But Hattie asked me, she said, like, Nina picks those songs at the beginning and you pick those songs at the middle and the end. I said, yeah. Nina picks better songs. And HJ was her husband. And when I first did a house visit with them, he had all these Bibles out, and Mormons and Jehovah's Witnesses were coming to the door. And he had all these, he's just trying to figure things out. And then he was 72 when we baptized him, and his wife died of pancreatic cancer. And he had a son who had mental illness issues, and he was in and out of trouble, and was trying to help. And then he got cancer, and he was a greeter at the door for years of the church. He would just smile and hand a bulletin. And these people, they're, God fills the world with them, and they, and his glory is in them. But because of these hierarchies and these pyramids, we don't get to see them unless you get down to the bottom of the pyramid and you shut up and open your eyes and pay attention, and you begin to realize, wow, God has richly blessed us. And if you're quiet and patient enough, you'll see the glory. So that's very true.
Yeah. It's hard to preach, though, because I always feel like I'm talking to people who have income and they're successful, and I'm thinking, what do I say to somebody that's in some way, every time I speak, at the end, I'm like, well, I should do on my channel or I should do a stream that says what I meant to say, because every time I say something, I'm like, I didn't really get it. And how do you even say to people, the thing I want from you is to give up all the things that you love, because we build our little kingdoms, and that's all passing, and everyone knows it. They hear the same thing every week. And yet we're so planted in the earth. That's the other thing I keep coming up with, is that we're stuck, is that we do only understand the hierarchy and getting better and being a better person because we're so stuck in the earth. We're planted here. And I long for Jesus, but don't pull me out right now, because I kind of like what you gave me. And that strange dilemma that I even wanted to say, when you said something about what's the matter in the video that I was watching, and it dawned on me that you're talking about material world, and even words that you use when you preach. What's the matter? Well, the matter is what makes up this world, but what's the spirit is the thing that actually holds everything up. But we see the matter, and what's the matter is our key, and what's underlying is, it's too hard to get to in some ways. And it's very strange to preach and keep getting more swings. And to me, I like your videos because you have enough time to really, and you're also deliberate or disciplined enough to very disciplined at how you get us from one point to another. And you have the time.
I try to be disciplined. I often fail.
The time is important. And what I'm pushing for in my preaching is I need more time, because 20 minutes, I do not know how to say something every week I'm like, well, I just have one more thing to say. And they know that means that I do not have one more thing to say. And I have to cut it off. And I often say, well, I didn't finish what I wanted to say, but it ends with Jesus. And it's like something like that. And
Yeah.
we got to move on. So, yeah. But it's such a wonderful thing to have to be able to swing, get another at bat. And as long as they'll have me, I'll keep swinging. So one of the things I wanted to talk about was, okay, so Melody, my niece, I wanted to mention Melody. So Melody I think she's 12 now. And she had a traumatic brain injury, and it's my great niece, I guess you would call it. So it's my niece's daughter, Melody. And when she was under 1, I think, she had a brain injury, and she is special needs and will never, I think she'll need assistance her whole life. She's not 12.
Yeah.
But she's the delight. And one of the great joys is my sister joined us at church. And it wasn't clear that she had that in her life. And she's in some way supportive of me. And then she brought Melody. So Melody had a fall. It's her daughter's child. And I have to watch how I say everything. But when Melody was hurt, my sister swooped in and said, "You're not going to raise this child," and took the child. Because she was injured, took her away from my niece. And they didn't fight too much. She just came in, and she had the mama bear that we better not fight this animal.
Yeah.
So she came and raised Melody and started coming to church probably 3 years ago. And Melody, one of her things, and this gets to the bottom of the hierarchy, Melody is such a joy for the church. It's an aging church, the church I preach at, maybe 40 or so people, and very few young people. It really is that average age of 50, or because the aging population weighs heavy on the scale. So Melody will come around, and her thing is she'll go up to people and say, "What's your name?" And they'll say, "My name is Jane." And she says, "Hi, Jane." And then she turns back to my sister, "That's Jane." And my sister says, "Yes, that's Jane." And then she'll do this to everybody. And the people, she'll have said it to people 10 or 20 times, week after week.
Yeah.
And my sister will take her out. And she told a story the other day of, I think she was at a meat counter or some kind of deli or something. The woman was cleaning up, and she was, just upset and, at a low point. She just it's a hard job. She wasn't appreciated. It's, she's in a dour mood. And Melody just says, "Hi, what's your name?" Or just says, "What's your name?" And she's all of a sudden, all the clouds lifted, and this beautiful interaction with what Jesus is calling us to, which for the life of us, how do you tell somebody, "I want you to be more like a disabled person and give up all your status and come"? And wouldn't it be something if people just came up to you and just with a wide open heart, no agenda, no status to lose, that you're some kind of hero in her eyes. She just wants to know who you are. And it's the most beautiful thing, and the church loves her. And I want her to be like a greeter, give her a little vest or something, that she is in some way exactly what we're aiming for. But for the life of us, we can't preach it or teach it. And it's the mystery that God reveals, this glory in the broken places, and it's so amazing. So I wanted to mention Melody.
I'm glad you did. We have Jill. Jill does that. Jill's got to be close to mine. She's in her 40s, I think. She's disabled. She's been disabled, and she's a daughter of a couple of people now. Fred's in his 90s. Jean, probably not yet, but she can't get the vaccine because she had an illness a number of years ago. But their disabled daughter, Jill, they bring her to church, and same thing. Same thing. Suddenly in that interaction, our pretense and our hurry and our busyness and all of these things that we think are so important, they all just, you set them all aside.
Yeah.
And suddenly it's like, oh yeah, why am I getting in the way of myself? Why am I really this important? Is all these cares, do they really matter? Oh, that's beautiful. It's beautifully told. Thank you.
You're welcome. It's, and when you're preaching and trying to get to that place, it's almost happens sometimes whimsically but even the opportunity to just keep thinking and, to live this life it's such a blessing to just be able to do this and to have time to watch Paul Vanderclay videos and wrestle with what is God calling us to.
Yeah.
And what is it to be a representative of Jesus, and what does all that mean? Because it's not an easy task.
No.
And working with the Scooter Gang, I can definitely figure I'll be insulted and I might look like Jesus because I'll be insulted and I'll stick it out and I'll bear that cross, and they're not interested, and I have to keep trying to find lost sheep, and they're for sure there, and they keep coming back, and I'm like, oh. I'll work this angle.
Usually at their own timing.
Yeah. You have to, in some way, plant seeds and be able to allow them to grow in a way that's God's work. It's not ours.
Yeah.
I liked when you said about what's the woman that midwife that there's we can be a midwife, but God does this strange work, and it doesn't. We don't get too much credit in the.
No. And they're not on a fairly predictable 42-week pattern. Sometimes they, one of the things I learned from my father's ministry, he was at his first church for 36 years. There's time is important, and sometimes people need decades, and that's okay. So don't be afraid of decades. This is God's world. It's not ours. We can trust him. So let him do his work.
Yeah.
Don't get in the way.
But get in the way we do.
Yes, we do.
And that's where I'm thinking we're stuck. And I keep thinking, I think I have to preach a simple gospel, because I don't know that we've done the first step yet. And it's, you keep having them, and storytelling, you can figure out, how do you tell these stories? And you look at scripture, and there are some stories that are easy to tell. I just went through Genesis, which was hard. I did my own like Peterson lecture going through Genesis, and it was a mess. It was not easy. The stories are too big. I got 20 minutes. I'm thinking, here's what God is revealing, and I want to say something a little nuanced, a little different. I'm actually going into Job now, and I want the challenges. And I love it. I love Job. To me, Job is it's such a wild story.
Yeah.
But I was thinking, strange to be in this, in ministry, and you're trying to think, how do these things connect? How does Jesus show up in Job? And it's like, well, I don't know. But I was thinking, because of the Satan and God interaction, and then he is released somehow to Job. I was thinking, Satan isn't mentioned in Joseph's story, but that, I might connect and say, what is it with Joseph that he had so much twists and turns that all was going wrong? And I think there's something to that has to be part of what I tell, is there are these powers and principalities that aren't always mentioned, but they're always in play.
Yeah.
And Joseph had a pretty rough go.
Yeah.
And we just, it's pretty bad, and it's an extended bad stroke of luck. Everybody hates him.
Yeah.
And then in the end, it's like a dream come true. The dream that he had initially comes true in the end, and it's not at all what anyone predicted. And the plot twists are just ridiculous, and always, there's another turn, and it turns out it's like they are bowing down to him, but he didn't want them to bow down there. And he's not some ruler trying to dominate them, that they were so angry and jealous. He's saving their life, and he's not taking credit. He's like, it's God that did it. This wasn't my plan.
Yeah.
go to jail and to be accused of rape or whatever. This isn't the way I worked it out. And I get that because my life is this thing that I don't have a great plan in place. And Peterson, in some sense, wants you to lay out this plan. It's like, well, as it turns out, you cannot have a plan at all. And that's I think the bottom of the pyramid is these people who are like, I'm just trying to get by.
Yeah.
And if I can be any use, and they're open to that. I don't have a lot of plans. Same with Melody. It's like, well, I didn't have a lot of plans. So now you're useful.
Yeah.
Because I have too many plans to go to a food bank and help. I have big goals and ambitions. But I do admire that. My daughter watched Simone Biles as she came into my daughter. I have two children. I didn't tell you that. I got married late. And that's I won't get into that, but that's its own wreck. I do have train wrecks and nothing but train wrecks in my life, and God keeps using me. But my daughter, I have a 13, and I married late. A 13 and an 8-year-old, and they're wonderful. My daughter was watching Simone Biles, and I totally believe that the hierarchy were planted in the earth, and Simone Biles is just a wonderful person to watch and admire. Where was I going with that? But in some way, we won't be her because she had to dedicate everything. And she's still, I think, a Christian woman and just sweet and tenderhearted and every wonderful thing that I want to be. Simone Biles. I want to be like that. And successful and popular and a champion of the world. But I'm stuck where I'm stuck. And I clearly don't have the motivation to do that many backflips. And, do all the things that she had to dedicate, 15 years of her life, totally dedicated, and then have all the gifts besides.
Yeah.
These people who are successful, there's a lot going into that. They were given a lot of gifts. They have a lot of the right things and the right circumstances, and the right people open doors. And yeah, and somehow I want to minister to. I want to say, I want to minister to. Let's just try and hit average. Let's just try and hit some very low thing and say, can I get enough in place that I can still be useful?
Yeah.
How do I not have too much on my plate that I'm too busy to be? And even when Jesus wants us in weakness, God will shine through.
Yeah.
It's like, so my weaknesses, I'm like, there's somehow a badge of honor, because for sure it's not me if good things happen, because it's clear I don't have all the things in place to say, for people to say, yeah, you are amazingly gifted. I'm like, yeah, I'm average. I learned to play guitar, but I got to the level where I can play pretty good. But I did special music on Sunday, and my voice is pretty average. There's another guy that does special music, and he's really gifted, and he's just got a beautiful velvety tone, and he plays guitar, and he'll do music, and everyone will be a little weepy and they'll clap. I did my special music, and then I hit my last note, and then a couple of people go, a little clap. I'm like, yeah, I know, this is my life. Everyone's crying. They're not like, thank you for that. They're guitar down and walk back. And I know it. And it's like, well, but I want you to know that that's the call, is you do your average work, because now God will get any kind of glory.
Yeah.
I don't get too much glory.
Yeah.
So I don't have to struggle with that. Where are we at here for time?
Oh, got another 5 minutes.
Okay, well, I wanted to mention one other thing was you had talked with Nick, and then you had your talk about the talk with Nick, and you talked about, well, the thing I want to say about this was one of my favorite artists was Jennifer Knapp, and she had a big Christian career.
I love Jennifer Knapp.
Oh, she was her heart was laid out, and her
I
music
know,
was so moving. And I just loved her. One time I went to a concert, me and a buddy, and it was a youth. We went to a Jennifer Knapp concert that was local. And man, I adore her. And we're front row.
and it's a
Yeah.
small venue.
Yeah.
So she's like right next to us, right in front of us. And then she plays her concert. And then at the end, she stops. And then she has a pick in her hand. And the team that was with me, sticks his hand out and she puts the pick in his hand. And I'm like, what? I'm the one who loves you. So I get the leftovers. And I'm like, but so I love Jennifer Knapp, and her music was so powerful and so heartfelt and then she dropped out of the scene. She just disappeared.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what in the world?
Yeah.
And nobody knows what happened. And then a couple years later, she started touring again,
Yeah.
and she came out as
Yep.
Faye.
Yep.
And I went and saw her,
Yeah.
and everything changed, because now she was in some way affirmed that it's when she was singing, she had a hidden
Yeah.
pain that God, she's crying out to God, can you reach me? Can you heal me?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was so extraordinarily beautiful that
Yeah.
this pain and torture she was going through.
Yeah.
And now that she's in some way affirmed and says, no, it wasn't sin.
Yeah.
It was that you didn't understand, and you didn't in some way affirm who I am.
Yeah.
And the power of her music, I don't think I care that much about her music now, and I don't think she'll be what she was.
No, I know.
She was a sinner, in some way, great pain.
Yeah.
And that sin, we don't want to call it, the church wants to say, well, we'll affirm, we won't call it. But there's something about the hardship, and you have it in the same way as the old Negro spirituals, where people in great pain,
Yeah.
their
They make
hearts
great
are
art.
so, they're so, it's all heart, it's all longing, it's the most beautiful things. And you don't want to put people in pain so that they can give you some good songs, but there's some connection that when it became not sin, when it wasn't her deep stress or crying out to God, when it became, I don't know, accepted behavior, that something was lost.
Yeah.
And that's something was, go ahead.
That's just so strange. It's but you're right. You're right.
And when I work with students, that's one of the real battles that students have, is because they, for sure, the race issues, they've gotten past some of them. They didn't grow up with the tensions. They're still there, but in the same way with affirming that they don't have a past.
Yeah.
And, I have to talk to them and be very cautious of the lines that I draw.
Yeah.
Because I want to be nothing but love. But,
Yeah.
You also want to say, I don't accept everything.
Yeah.
There seem to be fruitful unions.
Yeah.
And there seem to be fruitless unions. And you can't say it's the same, because fruit, I like a good apple. And it comes from a tree that produces fruit.
Yeah.
And I love the students. It's like, I'm glad your parents and boy and a girl got together. And I'm glad to have you here in this earth, this veil of suffering. So they're struggling with, but I love the ministry. And so there it is. There's my story.
Wow, Tom, this was great. You are going to let me share this, aren't you?
Yes, I wanted to not. I thought, if this really stinks, I'll really be upset.
I don't know how it was going to stink, Tom. I don't know. I can't imagine that.
I can muck things up, believe it or not. Yes.
Well, you didn't. Yeah. This was. These randos conversations are. You just never know what you're going to have on the other end of. Because it's a wide open calendar and people sign up, and it's a box of chocolates. You don't know what you're going to get.
Yeah.
But
it took me years to get back on that calendar.
Yeah, well, I know there's not that many slots, and they go immediately. So I'm sorry about that. It's just
it's okay. I don't want to guilt you into.
No, but I do want to do more. But they are. Yeah. It's not just the time. It's I don't know what it is. Is it the anxiety? Is it the energy? I talk about it actually in the video I'm going to make today. It's that what's so difficult about this is that probably, you never know, but probably all we get right now is sort of a stub of a potential relationship. And that's so
Right.
hard.
Yeah.
Because I feel like, I want to meet Melody, and I want to watch you preach, and I want to see your little
Yeah.
church, and I want to
Yeah.
see your
Yeah.
see your kids, and I want to
Yeah.
I want to meet these youths, and there's no, and that's again why I think, well, this is what heaven and our next life is for, where we're not bound by time in the way we are bound right
Right.
now.
Yeah.
And what a tremendously wonderful thing to think about.
Yeah.
So,
Hard to imagine.
yeah. So thank you, Tom. I'm
You're
so
welcome.
glad we finally had a chance to do this right. So
Same.
maybe we'll get a chance to do it again, or who knows. And maybe once, if I get my act together, we'll take the meetup show on the road, and I can go back on tour. And because that was great fun, the little tour that Job and John Van Dunk and I did. It got cut off by COVID, but
I'm all the way across the country, so you'd have to really
I
take
love
that.
Pennsylvania. I spent a lot of time in Pennsylvania, driving between New Jersey and Grand Rapids, Michigan. So
Okay.
it's a beautiful state.
Yeah.
So anyway, thank you, Tom. This was a
You're
delight.
welcome. Thank you.
So glad you
I'll
got a
keep
slot.
watching your videos.
All right. Well, God bless you and your ministry.
Well,
Keep swinging for average.